What's up, guys? So before I start this video, I just want to say that I don't glorify any drug use. I don't currently use any drugs, and this is for educational purposes only. So, take you back, I was 16 years old. I was in high school. I think I was a junior in high school at the time. I was getting into a lot of trouble though. I was trying a lot of drugs, and I was just messing up in a lot of ways. I know in this particular time period, I was trying a lot of pharmaceuticals, I guess you could say. And particularly, I remember finding in my house, I think my parents had some old stash of sleeping pills. Some of it was Lunesta, I think there was some Ambiens, and then there was another one I forget the name of. But they all essentially kind of had the same effect. So to start, it was a weeknight before school, and I took a few of these pills. I think it was the Lunesta, and I took, I guess, more than I intended. I must have taken it, to be honest, like at night, and kind of when I woke up in the morning before school. I was a little blacked out, so I don't remember. But I know I went to school that day, and I know in school I was messed up, and I was just doing things that didn't make sense, like walking the opposite way of where the classroom was at the time of the start of class, and the teachers started looking at me funny. So eventually they gained some suspicion, and I got sent down to the principal's office. Now at the principal's office, they wanted to drug test me because they thought I was under the influence, which I was. And they called my mom in, and they had this whole big like little meeting, in the vice principal's room. And at the time, I really thought I was arguing a good case, telling them that they have no reason to think I was, messed up. I'm fine. I'm sober. I was talking coherently, I guess, enough, explaining that to them that, I don't know, they eventually just let me go home without the drug test. Now, I thought this was a blessing, to be honest. I thought I got away with it. But what was to come was something way more intense. So my parents, they had to go to meet with some friends for a couple hours, just leaving me and my brother at the house. And at that point, I was in a blackout completely, and I went to go take more pills right away. And if you ever taken these pills before, like a Lunesta or Ambien, they got this effect where they make you black out like you're on a bunch of Xanax, but they also give you a hallucination effect where you start to trip out and become delirious. And that's the point I was at. And I remember I was having clear hallucinations at this point. I remember going to the basement, telling my brother to come to the other room with me, that he needs to come see this right away. And I thought I was able to move objects with my mind, and I thought I was pulling on some kind of invisible rope and moving the walls of the house in and out. And I think he thought I was on some drugs or just losing my mind. So I guess I took more pills after that. And next thing I remember was seeing a guy crawling into the other window of my house, which is in my parents' room. And that's when I snapped. I went to the kitchen, I grabbed a knife, I ran down to my brother with a big knife in my hand, telling him that there's somebody in the house, that he should go hide. And this scared the shit out of him because he didn't know what the hell was going on with me and what I was capable of with that knife in my hand. So he ran out the house and went to the neighbors, let them know what I was doing, which they then called my parents. My parents came back home. They tried to ask me what kind of drugs I was on. I told them there was a naked guy in the house and I was trying to find him. And I started to get mad at them because they weren't believing me. I started to go into a frenzy. I was knocking furniture over. I was breaking shit. And eventually the cops were called. When the cops got there, I was also explaining to them that there was a guy in the house that was breaking in naked and that they should help me go look for him. And I was getting mad at them because they just kept asking me what drugs I took, and I thought they weren't doing their job right. So I started to get pissed, and I'm like, dude, what kind of cops are you guys worrying about what kind of drugs I took, which I thought I was completely sober at the time, and not helping me look for an intruder in my house that's coming here to kill us? And I think it was at that point they looked over at each other, chuckled a little bit, realized there was no point in arguing or trying to convince me of anything, and next thing I knew, I was restrained. One thing led to another, and somehow I finally got into an ambulance and they brought me into the hospital. Were a few really, really strange, trippy memories that really don't make any sense. I remember sitting in the emergency room bed and looking out into the hallway from the room, and you know how they have those two colored lines on the hospital hallway floors, maybe three, that direct you into different places? Well, I just remember seeing that these lines looked like almost like they were neon lights with liquid running through them, going through all the hallways. And I remember peeking my head out the hallway and seeing two little girls, just like in the Shining movie, standing there looking at me, dressed like they were from the 1930s. And yeah, this had to be a hallucination. And the whole experience was kind of like a surreal dream, but it was a bit nightmarish because there was not too much good happening in the dream. So I think probably 7 or 8 hours must have went by. I didn't really have track of time, but I know the whole night was over at that point. They pulled me into another room with padded walls and a TV inside a plastic encasing. And I had never been in a room like this in a hospital before, but I found it interesting. And like I said, I still didn't really comprehend that I was in a hospital. But I guess a doctor had came in there and they started to ask me the most basic questions. They wanted to ask me my name, my date of birth, the date. I got all the questions wrong. You know, it was probably around 2011 at the time. I was answering, telling them it was the 1990s. I couldn't spell my name. I didn't know my birth date. And I didn't really comprehend at the fact of how insane I just was at this moment. So the doctors, seeing that I couldn't answer the most basic questions, deemed me insane. And not only that, but up until this point, they didn't know what drugs I took because Lunestas and Ambiens, they weren't coming up on a drug test. I wasn't telling them what I took, nor do I think I could even remember what I took at this point, just because of how gone I was. So I think by the time they got me into that padded room, my parents must have seen something at the house and realized all the sleeping pills were gone. Turns out I took all of them. And I mean, there must have been more than 40 or 50 pills, and I took all of them. It's a miracle that I didn't have any serious health complications of this, but it seriously, seriously messed me up. And it messed me up for a long time because this wasn't the end of it. After my little stay in that hospital padded room, they declared me legally insane and ruled that I needed to go to the psychiatric hospital, which I was then transferred to. And that, my friends, is going to be a story time for part 2.